Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Healthtech Pigeon podcast, dissecting and discussing the latest health tech news so you don't have to. I'm Amy, and with me today, I'm delighted to be joined by SomX's Taffy. Hello, Taffy. And we've also got Hollie here too. Hello, Hollie.
Hello.
And not to forget Adama on producer duties, as usual, smashing it with the production. Well, we have quite a few stories, interesting stories this week to get into, and quite an array we're covering today, from more lighthearted to much more serious. And excited to delve into these. So let's get started on our first story. So this study comes from the University of Geneva, and the study claims that AI chatbots outscore humans on emotional intelligence tests. So researchers at the university, they pitted 6 large language models, including ChatGPT and Gemini, against standard kind of corporate emotional intelligence assessments. We'll come back to that. The bots averaged 82% correct versus 56% for humans. And they also generated new emotional intelligence tests. Now, what's interesting about this is the kind of claims and links that the scientists have made on the back of this study. So they say that they've chosen 5 tests commonly used in both research and corporate settings. They involved emotionally charged scenarios designed to assess the ability to understand, regulate, and manage emotions. That was said by the principal investigator of the study. So one example of this is a question that I'm going to pose to both Hollie and Taffy to see if they can answer, which is an example here. So this is an example scenario. One of Michael's colleagues has stolen his idea and is being unfairly congratulated. What would Michael's most effective reaction be? A, argue with the colleague involved. B, talk to his superior about the situation. C, silently resent his colleague. Or D, steal an idea back. So this is the kind of scenarios that they were posing to the LLMs. And I'm just, for the sake of argument, going to ask Taffy and Hollie, what would you answer for that question? And let's see if you get it right. And then we can discuss the story.
Oh God, it's a tricky one, isn't it, Amy? I think as much like any of us would probably say the B, Michael should talk to his superior about the situation. Taffy, what about you? Any differing opinions?
Yeah, I think I'd probably be prone to that one as well. But at the same time, sometimes it can be hard to manage your emotions. So maybe the realistic one is, I think it was C.
Silently resent the colleague.
Yeah, like I feel like the right thing is to speak to your supervisor, but putting that into practice can sometimes be a bit like the average day person is probably going to avoid a conflict, if you know what I mean. So probably resentment.
Well, exactly that, Taffy. And I think, this just raises so many questions. So yeah, they got the chatbots to do these kind of scenarios and measured the responses, and apparently they proved to be as reliable and clear and as realistic as humans. So many questions. One, can we really say? Well, actually, before I get into that, the researchers have said that, and this is what they've quoted in the article, these results pave the way for AI to be used in contexts thought to be reserved for humans.
It's a very bold statement.
Very bold statement. Very bold statement. And I think we need to discuss this in a little more detail around a few things. One, around this claim, it's obviously a big claim, but also what these kind of claims can mean for public discussion about AI. And also just generally around whether we can even say that these kind of emotional intelligence scenarios really indicate the ability to understand human situations and emotions, which, as we know, are incredibly complicated. And who's to really say that there's right and wrong answers? I mean, I'm not saying that you should silently resent your colleagues and steal the ideas back, but sometimes there isn't. Sometimes there are. It's not black and white. That's my opinion. So let's discuss the claims. Do you think, Taffy, Hollie, do you think that that it's fair for the researchers to be drawing this conclusion? And what do you think about this kind of statement that is linking this kind of work to actually sort of put forward that AI could replace context thought to be reserved for humans?
I mean, I'll tell you what, when I first read this, I was like, I didn't really know what to think of it. There's many different thoughts flying around, so I'll try and put them into order. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting one. I think, as we said, very bold claim to be making this kind of what I think is quite a tenuous link to, human capabilities. I think that's probably the larger kind of bigger question. But I guess actually talking about the study itself. So yeah, as you said, Amy, like the team put 6 AI systems against this emotional intelligence test. I thought what was quite funny about this, and I think it sort of links into what you said, Taffy, in answer to the earlier question that they posed, is this idea that, I know when we've chatted, as a team, that emotional side of it has always been something that AI cannot do. That is purely human, that kind of emotional reasoning. And I think, the article even says it itself. AI is essentially just long strings of code, it's reasoning. It is only as good as, what it is fed and the data it is fed. I think with this one, my first kind of initial thought actually came to Taffy, what you said is about, this idea that these questions are not so black and white. Like, yes, there is a typical right answer in every situation. That I guess this sort of, emotional reasoning test would suggest. But actually, yeah, those situations are not so black and white, and the sort of kind of actual emotional part of it is that there is so many kind of deeper, I guess, facets to the answers to these questions that only a human can sort of reason. So I think that sort of got me in a bit of a loop going round and round with this. But yeah, Taffy, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add to that.
So, what I'm going to say might be a bit controversial, but I think AI could actually have a better picture emotionally just because it draws so much information and data. Like, for example, we were like speaking today about the case study on like women and ethnic women, like black women being treated not so well in care, and they would like pull lots of resources from across the whole world, really, like maybe even case studies or surveys or whatever. So I feel like the conclusions they come to, they have more information to draw compared to maybe like, 'cause some people are ignorant, some people aren't like aware of studies and aware of what's going on right now and news. So I think there's a point to be made that AI can actually come to emotional conclusions because they can use more data to piece together like emotional decisions.
I
I don't
get
know if
what
what I'm saying makes sense.
I get what you're saying, but is that emotion? This is going to get really like I feel like it's getting really deep, but like, is that emotion or is that just reasoning based on the data that you have? Because for me, this feels like sort of a reasoning test, a bit like when, you know, companies do those, you know, personality tests or what are they called? A lot of graduate schemes use them. The name escapes me. Logical reasoning, or you know, things like that.
Logical reasoning test, yeah, like the test you have to do to get into medical school as well. Like they have these kind of reasoning exams.
But the idea is with that everyone's different, and there's not always necessarily a right answer. I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking too deeply into this, but
I guess there's so many things to dig into here. And actually, Taffy, I agree with your point that like potentially the data could come up with a more logical answer for a scenario that would sort of like maybe be considered the right answer. But I think the danger is, what is that doing? What does that do for the human response? Where does that leave the human response and the value for it? And you know, we often talk about this in a medical setting, of that valuing the personal opinion and having that ability to have the emotional sympathy or the kind of higher level feelings and what we would consider as emotion to actually drive good decisions that aren't just what would be typically the right decision, or how you would consider, or something that would be considered as the typically normal or right decision. And I think that's where the human intuition comes in. So yeah, maybe there's just a distinction we have to make around where these kind of like data-led reasoning AI tools can help, and where they can't. And maybe there's a line we have to draw somewhere, but I don't know what that line is either. It's it raises a lot of questions.
Yeah, I agree with you actually, because I love how you mentioned where to draw the line, because I know for me, when I use ChatGPT, it's very good at diagnosing my emotions. And it's very good. Like, it's better explaining it than me. But I guess like we wouldn't want to put, like, we don't want to put that as like the ultimate for bigger decisions. Like if it's like, oh, like how am I feeling today about this thing, like that's really chill, and like it's not life determining, if that makes sense. But then applying that to like, should someone have surgery or not, like it's a bit more risky. So I love how it's important to really discern like when and where is like the best practice to use this.
And I guess it's also that point of normalizing, like we're sort of going towards a point of where the answer is always going to be the same. I think is quite dangerous. Like we need the flair of human sort of, not necessarily error, but choices that might be outside of the norm, to then pave the way for different scenarios and different ideas. If we sort of are heading towards this unified view of what emotional response should be, that kind of worries me on how we're going to progress, or how we're not going to progress as a society. So yes, very, very interesting. Interesting study that raises interesting questions, and quite looking forward to seeing a little bit more of a reaction on this, and how it unfolds, I suppose. I think we've covered that in enough depth. So yes, we obviously link these stories in Pigeon, so you can go and read a little bit more about it if you like to learn more about this. So on to our next story. The next story we're going to discuss is about a US-based company, OpenEvidence, raising big sum of money, 210 million, in their Series B round for their medical chatbot. So they have just closed their Series B led by Google Ventures and Kleiner Perkins, and now their valuation has boosted to around 3.5 billion. The platform is actually free to use by doctors. So they're claiming that already 40% of US doctors have signed up to their platform. And they lean on an ad-supported model. So they make their money through advertising. And essentially, they sift through loads of peer-reviewed papers in arguably seconds to provide insights to doctors on specific scenarios. They claim that the money is going to help them launch Deep Consult, which will be an AI co-pilot that spends up to an hour generating PhD level research summaries while clinicians can step away from the computer. They mention aspects around physician and clinician burnout and shortfalls in doctors, obviously aiming to kind of address that gap and support doctors to have the best, most up-to-date clinical information really, really quickly at their fingertips. So, the technology is impressive. The scale of the technology is also impressive. This is obviously US based, so for the UK, it's not widely used here yet, but the potential for it to be used here is definitely something that we could chat about. And it's not out of the question that it could come to the UK and be used in the NHS. Having said that, there would have to be a lot of regulations that it would have to go through, as we know, to actually get used across the NHS, which is probably a good thing, given obviously given how important the regulations are in this aspect, and also related to what we just discussed. So, Taffy, Hollie, do you have any immediate thoughts on this technology? How useful we think it's going to be for doctors, and any thoughts?
Wow, I will kickstart this time. I think I loved your point about it being US based and how it's coming to the UK, because I feel like US are quicker to implement tech compared to the UK, just because I guess the systems is just different. But at the same time, I think the NHS can be a bit slow. Sorry, I sound so negative, but I think to have the investment that it's received, it obviously has a lot of value. So I think it's really good that it could potentially come to the UK.
Yeah, Taffy, just to clarify, I don't know if it is coming to the UK, but it's a great point that the translation would be and adoption would be potentially a little slower. But maybe that's a good thing, that we have these regulations in place.
I think chat boxes can be really good for clinicians because it's almost like that assistant, and they can draw information from lots of different places quickly, rapidly. Of course, it becomes dangerous if you're reliant on the chat box, because I think you do need that human-centered care where you're able to, if you have a patient and you're examining them, a chat box obviously can't examine a patient. So I think it's important to have a balance of using AI and using the chat box, but at the same time ensuring that at the end of the day the clinician is the one that makes these decisions on what to do and not becoming too dependent on chat boxes.
Yeah, absolutely. The trust and is a recurring theme in talking about AI tools in healthcare, and especially for things like OpenEvidence, which Yeah, I mean, it's about clinical evidence and decisions. So you will always need that oversight from a clinician. But I think, the value here is the fact that there is just so much information, and there's so much new information being published all the time about diseases, treatments, course of actions, doses, drugs, what types of treatments, how long for, regimens. All of that stuff is being published at like such a high rate that it's almost impossible for doctors to keep up with it. So tools like this can actually assimilate information really quickly, and just like we've experienced using AI tools in our day-to-day work, it can do that very thing that they really need, which is get the right sources of information really quickly. So yeah, I think it seems like a relatively straightforward thing to sort of adopt, but there still are risks, and we should obviously consider them just in the grand scheme of how quickly AI is rapidly evolving, and we're developing super intelligent AI. It's coming, and we there are risks involved with that in itself. So yes.
I think I sort of echo what you guys have said. For me, it's only sort of a positive thing. Amy, as you said, the volume of data in research. I think it actually says in the article. Sorry if you guys have mentioned this already. Obviously dealing with water flying through the window. Where was it here? Volume of medical research published per year is doubling every 5 years. So it's a huge amount that, we've spoken before about how tight, clinicians are obviously burnt out, really strapped for time with their day jobs as it is. So keeping on top of all this latest medical research as well is obviously something that is consistently quite challenging. So yeah, I think a tool like this is only going to be extremely useful and beneficial. I think as well from a patient perspective, I'm sure we've all been, and many listeners have too, in doctor's appointments where they sat and maybe queried something using Google. And I'm sure many of us have been like, what is it? The amount of, I guess, health misinformation out there is obviously ever growing. And obviously we're going to those doctor's appointments, having full trust that they have the education, the understanding to decipher between misinformation and validated and correct information. But I guess all of that being said, just from, I think, a patient benefit, being able to see a clinician use something like this, I think also builds that kind of trust piece as well, knowing that it's coming from that, really top tier peer-reviewed journals, and hopefully sort of, quite evidence-backed research as well. So I think that sort of goes quite a long way too.
And I think, I guess linking to what we spoke about at the very beginning of this discussion around emotional intelligence, and then and AI and chatbots, this is exactly the kind of thing that chatbots and AI are really good at, is assimilating data, putting together a rational argument, bringing in lots of multiple data sources into one place, streamlining it for a particular use. And this feels more like a more comfortable place where of a more comfortable use of AI, which it's already significantly helping, loads of US doctors using it. So compared to the idea that AI can and chatbots can get involved in emotional reasoning, so this is like, I guess when we were talking about that line of where do we draw the line, this is like, it feels within the line for me anyway.
I'd agree.
It feels within the line. It feels within the line. And we've talked about other stories on Pigeon before, like Mark Zuckerberg's talking about AI friends for like mental health reasons, and that kind of blurs the lines a little bit again on the use of AI in healthcare and in society. So yeah, this is good. We're happy with this, and yeah, if people want to find out more, they can obviously read the piece in Pigeon, read the full piece, and find out more about what the company is doing with their big injection of cash. I think it's time to move on to our final story. So the final story we're going to be talking about is a report finding that Black women were denied pain relief on NHS maternity wards. This is actually forthcoming. The report hasn't actually been published yet, so this piece is sort of anticipating the report, which we'll be publishing on Monday, which will be tomorrow when this is released. And the group 5x More reveals that 1 in 4 Black women surveyed experienced racial discrimination in NHS maternity care. Examples include being refused gas and air on epidurals and being dismissed as strong Black women. Today, Black women are 2.3 times more likely to die than white women in pregnancy and labour and after giving birth, which means that 1 Black woman dies in every 3,500 births, compared with 1 white woman dying in every 8,200 births. It's like a significant difference there. Overall, the study of 845 pregnant women found that a quarter had experienced race discrimination during their care, and that was in July 2021, between July 2021 and this year. So it's recent. It's not historic data. Almost a quarter, 23%, did not actually receive the pain relief they requested, and 40% were given absolutely no explanation why. So, I mean, this is obviously a emotionally charged topic. This is a serious topic. It's something that's not spoken about a lot, actually, especially in regards to specific scenarios like this, like in the maternity ward. And I think it's tragic that this is it's still happening, and I'd love to discuss any thoughts from you both on what we can potentially do, what this might mean for health tech, and where we see the opportunities to kind of support these women, and any additional thoughts from you both on this study. So, anyone want to kick off with any reflections on the piece?
I think it is quite hard to hear. Yeah, because obviously I can imagine mums in those positions already trying to push out a whole new, like push out life outside of themselves, and what more not having the support and being listened to as well. So I can imagine that's extremely difficult. I think it's really good that they're surveying this as well, because I guess people's stories can sometimes remain silent, or maybe a lot of I know for me sometimes I can second guess, like, was I overthinking it? So it's really good that they're actually like looking into it and surveying this. And I guess the way to move forward is, I guess, creating systems so that these women aren't going to be silenced in the future. I don't know practically what that would look like. Maybe more training for care workers, to be able to use the right language to communicate, and ultimately to provide the care that's needed for these women. But yeah, I guess maybe the key to all of this is better education. I know in maternity wards as well, there can be a familiarity that can happen between like the mums and I don't know if it's midwives and doctors or whatever, but I guess not making sure that familiarity doesn't breed contempt, but really respecting when someone says that they need a specific care and not like downplaying it or laughing it off. Um, so yeah, I think the problem could lie in the fact that yeah, maybe people aren't being heard because maybe there's too much familiarity, if that makes sense. Like you're strong black woman, maybe the joke has gone too far in some cases. But hopefully, yeah, this can bring about change and maybe provide more education and
Yeah.
training so that the statistic can go down.
I love your point about education. I think, we've, as a society in the last few years, have had campaigns and moments and media attention on racial movements, and it's all about that, isn't it? It's about raising awareness. It's about challenging the status quo and what's currently happening, and so that we can try and improve it. And even though it's not a simple solution sometimes, because racism is a very complex it's a complex issue that can be, involved in subconscious bias that people have, and things that are not easily sort of just fixed. So this kind of, as you said, like this kind of unearthing of these discussions is exactly how we're going to kind of push forward and try and address the stigmas, the issues that are still happening, and particularly in healthcare. It's the very sort of nature of healthcare and treatment is that it's fair, and people shouldn't be not given care because of the color of their skin, the way they look, the gender they are, the disabilities they have, or whatever that may be. It should be a fair process of good care for all, and I think that everybody in healthcare would agree with that. So it's just about how do we find it, and this kind of information does unearth that. um Holly, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with you both in that I think it's great that, you know, this sort of report is, or it could be they have reported on this. And I'd actually be interested to see when the report comes out, sort of the finer details of that, and also sort of, I think Wes says in this quote sort of about, how he plans to change, where is it, the article? I can't find it, but sort of the action plan he plans to put in place to sort of change, the system. So I'd be interested to see actually what that looks like in practice, because as you said, Taffy, I'm not quite sure, on the ground practically how they would plan to go about this. But I think in terms of the report, it's great that they reported on it. I mean, as you said, Amy, absolutely shocking statistics in this, and it's worrying that we're, I guess, in 2025, and this is still, a big issue. Like, it shouldn't be, you know. And I think actually what's most worrying about this, I think it says it in the report down here about the authors, have warned there's a suggesting kind of worrying normalization of substandard treatment. And I think, obviously this report shines a light on maternity care, but we know that these are going to be larger system-wide issues. So I think actually, yeah, I'd be really interested to see sort of how, what this sort of looks like in practice in terms of driving change. Yeah, it's shocking.
Yeah, actually, I really like your point, Holly, around what this means for care beyond maternity, because this obviously is just touching on that, and is looking there. But how deep rooted is this, and also why is this happening in maternity care? That's a question. Why here? Where, as Taffy said, it's quite a familiar environment. It's a place where women so desperately need to feel safe. You're giving life to the earth. You are birthing a child. It should be sort of the ultimate place of safety, and to have that is shocking. I mean, on the back of this, the government has announced that they are going to do an investigation into the maternity of 10 hospital trusts, alongside a national task force that will be personally chaired by Streeting, in an effort to improve it. So it's reassuring that it's being looked into, and that they're specifically addressing Black women in this, and want to have that as a key feature.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something as well. Like, I love what you shared about how now there's going to be more investigations, because I think that actually is going to empower the women to be able to like challenge if they're told no. But I guess when there isn't that like validation, like women can feel that that is okay. So it's really amazing that there's now investigations happening to empower women. And I guess in the long run, all pregnant women will get that education to be like, no, you can stand up for yourself. Because it's funny, because it's also with happening with it also happens with white women as well. I was speaking to a lady yesterday, and she was telling me her pregnancy experience, and the nurse was like, no, you can't have epidural, even though she really wanted it. So I think it's going to actually just empower women across the whole board, to be able to voice their care, if that makes sense. So
No, absolutely. And I mean, we must listen to patients and women and everyone, and listen to their thoughts and feelings. So yeah, really, really encouraging to see the spotlights on this, and we look forward to reading the reports when it comes out, and finding out more about how this evolves. So thank you both for sharing that. I think that leads us to the end of our discussion today. Unless either of you had any final thoughts you want to give. No?
Nothing from me.
Nothing from you. I think we've, as mentioned right at the start, we've had an array to cover today, from more crazy claims from scientists to quite serious matters that require, investigation and like public discourse. As ever, covering the multitude of things that come under health tech and AI and healthcare, here on Healthtech Pigeon. So thank you all for listening. As always, you can find the stories on healthtechpigeon.com, and subscribe to us on Healthtech Pigeon socials, where you can get the latest news and stories, and subscribe to our newsletter. Ask your friends to subscribe, share the love. So yes, thanks for listening as always, and thanks Taffy, thanks Adama, thanks Hollie, and we'll see you next time.